Welcome to Pulp Mythos. This is it. This is the finale of The Undoing. This was episode 6, the series finale. I'm here with Spencer and Larry, and we're going to discuss it in depth. We all had sort of different opinions, so this is going to be very interesting. I want to hear what the audience, what you guys think about it. You know, leave a comment. Tell us if you enjoyed it, didn't enjoy it. You know, just how you felt about it. We've had a lot of great back and forth with the audience in the comment section over the last several weeks, and we want to keep that up. Hit that like button. If you haven't hit the sub button, please do so, because there is a lot of content coming to the channel. We are not going anywhere. Next Sunday, we'll be right back here with a review for the upcoming Bryan Cranston series, Your Honor, which will be on Showtime. And then we have decided we will be doing The Stand, which I believe starts mid-December. So we'll be doing that as well. So a lot of content coming to the channel. But let's talk about The Undoing. I just want gut reaction. Were you satisfied? Yes, no, sorta. I'm leaning towards yes. And go.
I don't want to go into a full explanation just yet, but I enjoyed it. It's my wife didn't like the ending. she didn't, but I felt it was good because the mystery the whole time was throwing us off, and then it went right back to the obvious choice the whole time. So I to me that was them tricking us. Although I wasn't surprised when they revealed who it was, but at the same note, I was like, well, shit. All these theories I kept throwing out are just me grasping at straws, apparently. So I wasn't mad at all. I was still surprised, and to see how it played out, I enjoyed.
I'm kind of the opposite opinion, even though I did kind of like it to some degree. You know, like Brian said, I'm leaning towards. You know, it's like, yeah, this is an all right ending. Could have been better. You know, it doesn't really diminish the show for me at all. You know, still enjoyed the ride and the process. Like, but now when you phrase it like that it's like, oh, you know, this was that was a fake out. Some of these other clues and things, you know, or us grasping at shows. It seems less deep, and now it kind of feels like, yeah, that statement makes it feel like a Lost ending to me. You know, like the ending to Lost. It's not that bad, but you know, I'm just saying it could have been more complex, you know, rather than go with the obvious answer of, oh, it's Jonathan because he's a liar and a sociopath, and he's the sole liar and sociopath that we've seen on the show. It's a little bit lazy.
I would disagree with that only because, narcissism, they portray this image to the general public that, they're this great stand-up human being, that they're, these amazing people. Nobody has anything bad to say about them or anything, except for the people who are closest to them, who see the real them, who see like when he flipped the switch and went from one extreme to the next. Like, those are the people who are closest, are the only ones that see that. So to me, this was kind of unveiling who he really was as a person, as opposed to being a cop out. Because
Well, it kind of is, because I mean, we had that answer early on that that's who he was as a person. You know, the minute that he came back into the picture and we saw the lies and everything, we had him pegged as this. You know, so at that point, it becomes the most obvious answer that, you know, he's messing around. That, you know, he's probably lying now. You know, when it turns out, you know, his sister died and he seemed to have very, you know, little remorse about that situation. You know, it would have, like you said, he's a narcissist, so it was obvious. You know, last episode, heck, it was more obvious, episode 3, even though we were saying it was Sylvia. And I think we were saying it was Sylvia because we were given the show potentially, like, keep in mind, again, you know, I want to preface this with saying, you know, I did like the show and I was okay with the ending. You know, I think us saying it was Sylvia, we were giving the writing more credit than it was due. You know, because how much better would that final scene have been, you know, if it had continued a little longer, and, you know, Sylvia being in that courtroom, Sylvia having a conversation where they're saying a lot and not really saying much with the prosecutor. You know, how much more would it have added to that if it turned out it was her, that she's been playing them, that, you know, this was Sylvia, you know, just kind of making, you know, Jonathan and Grace their own undoing in a way. And not saying it necessarily has to be her, just saying that, you know, it's not really that complex a web if it turns out, oh, it's just Jonathan. We just made you overthink a little bit.
Well, a show like this is designed to throw you off. You know, that's the name of the game. It's a mystery, and it's designed to throw you off. Now, the difficulty in writing something like that is you want to do it in a way that doesn't anger your audience when the resolution happens. So I'm getting from the two of you, Larry, you were irritated or angered by the resolution. Is
That's
that
that again, this is the Guardians of the Galaxy situation. Not at all. I just think that they took the easy route. You know, like much like Guardians of the Galaxy, I enjoyed the ride. I just
I,
think I think it could have been better. I think it
well,
could have been so much better. Is all.
would you guys? I'm gonna say what I think the show was truly about, and I want your guys' opinion if you agree or disagree, and what you think the show was about. I think the show, at the end of the day, was about how well do you really know those close to you? How well do you know a person? You know, she had been with him almost, 2 decades. And yet, in the end, she really didn't truly know him. And then also, the other part of it, I think, it has to do with children. Children and their parents, that dynamic, Miguel. We'll get into the whole him being put on the stand, but the idea of Henry carrying the burden of, he's pretty sure his father did it and he's covering it up for him, and the love a child has for their parents. You even have the idea of how, which we know is BS now, but how Jonathan felt about Miguel. There are a lot of ideas about children and parenting in this too. What do you
Well,
guys think? Go ahead.
well, I want to say this much. You know, if it's about how well do you actually know a person, these personal betrayals, not only being from her husband, but from her best friend as well, would also fit into that theme.
And son, I mean,
Yeah,
not true betrayal, but sort of.
yeah.
He did cover that up.
The fact that he covered these things up, and just the idea that she thought maybe it could be him for a bit, and the fact that that he lost trust in his father throughout this, and whether it was him or not, they still, like, they don't have him. They still never truly knew him as a person, even if it didn't turn out it was him. This family is still, it, I can't say this word right now for some reason, but irreconcilable.
Irreconcilable differences.
And yeah, that word you said, they're destroyed beyond repair. They'll never be the same family they were. They'd never actually be able to trust Jonathan. That divorce was coming, whether they liked it or not, because they can't be a family after all the lies that happened, and after seeing how easy he lies and makes up narratives, and the fact that his first thought was, "Oh, I'm off the hook. They think it's my son." Not, no, our son couldn't have possibly done this, or Grace, what do we do if it's him? Like, is there any way we can help? His first thought was, I'm off the hook. It's probably him. Let's, like, what if it's Henry?
Well, all they needed was reasonable doubt. So if his lawyer could have made anybody in question at all, that's all they would have needed to get him off.
Yeah, but that still would have put his son in jeopardy, because it would have got him off, and his son wouldn't have been charged for the murder necessarily, but he would be charged for tampering with evidence.
Oh, I know. I'm just saying that he was at the point where he was more important than his kid. Like, he was just trying to get anybody to doubt that it was him at all cost. Even if they were pointing a finger at his kid, even a little bit, or tamper with evidence, or, it's all the things would have just kind of pointed the finger maybe at somebody else, which would have been just enough to get him from a murder conviction, regardless of whether or not it would have sent his son to juvie or, caught him up in the system for the rest of his life. He didn't care at that point. It was about Jonathan.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that's just my point there, that it's still that character study, whether you have him as the murderer or not, it still becomes a situation where it's like, how well do you actually know this person? And it's a display of how bad someone's narcissism and sociopathy can be.
Well, I think that they showed that I think Grace did know him. There was a line that the prosecutor said that I don't remember the term, the psychological term, where it's you don't want to see the worst in people, even if you know it, you kind of willingly ignore it. And I think that Sylvia, because when Sylvia talked to the prosecutor and kind of put all those bugs in her ear, Sylvia was
Well,
Grace's confidant.
let's talk about that in depth because, yeah,
Oh yeah,
Grace's plan. Grace took down Jonathan. She told Sylvia to, help the prosecution and set up the line of questioning and everything. Now, at this point, the decision was made as a result of they found the hammer. They decided they weren't going to use it, and she was seeing how Jonathan was treating Henry, and she came to a point where she made the decision: no matter what, I cannot have Jonathan in Henry's life. Now, this was my question. This is the only real mystery of the episode, in my opinion. Let's see if you agree. Do you think she was 100% sure Jonathan did it, or do you think she didn't care at that point? In other words, did she have any doubt in her mind that Jonathan did it, but she would rather him go to prison than to be in her son's life? I wish we had gotten some dialogue post at the end where she talked about that, because that was the only thing that was sort of, I kept thinking the whole time, like, does she 100% sure, or does she not care anymore? She just wants Jonathan gone.
I think it's a little, well, I think it's a little bit believing that he probably did it, and more so trying to protect Henry, because at the end, when she was, running to Henry, when they were in the helicopter, all that stuff, it kept her line wasn't like, I can't believe he would do this. Well, it was, don't hurt Henry. Don't hurt Henry. I want Henry to be safe. Her main focus was her kid. So I think that once she realized that Jonathan was willing to throw Henry under the bus to save himself, she was trying to protect Henry.
Yeah, I know she was trying to protect Henry, but the question is, do you think she had any doubt that Jonathan did it, or do you think she was 100% guaranteed for a fact knew he did it? Because if she had any doubt, then that means she was willing to take him out regardless. And that to me, that's an interesting story, or that's an interesting, character development.
Well, I think that she still doubted. I don't think that she knew 100% that it was Jonathan, but I think that at that point in time, it didn't matter. She saw Jonathan for the monster he was. So regardless of whether or not he, I know, I want to say pull the trigger. I know he didn't shoot her, but like, regardless of whether he committed the crime, she didn't care at that point. She didn't want that monster around her child anymore. So I think that she still doubted whether or not he actually 100% did it. But at that point, it was all about Henry, and she didn't care.
Yeah, and I agree, and I think the answer was 100% in that scene where it's just her and Henry talking, and she's asking him, whether or not he thinks they can be a family again, and Henry asks her back, well, what do you want, and she says, I want what's best for you, and I think at that time and place, it really didn't matter, that it was best for his father not to be in his life after all that happened, after you get the reveal of who the man is and the fact that he's the type of person that, in order to save his own skin, was more than willing to throw his son under the bus, knowing that he committed that murder and that all it would take to save his family and to not implicate anyone else would be for him to confess. He didn't care because he didn't really care about those people.
Well, and I see what you're saying, Brian, too, is she willing to put what may be an innocent man?
That's exactly where I'm going.
But, well, yeah, and that's what I'm getting at too. It didn't matter.
If it came to my kids over somebody else who I wasn't 100% sure, like, he still revealed himself to be a monster. Regardless of whether he killed her or not, he was still a monster. So if it meant protecting my kids from a monster, I would sure shit put an innocent person in jail to protect my kids. Like, to me, I have zero doubt that what she was doing was just trying to protect her kid, but I don't think that her thought went anywhere to whether or not he's guilty. She was just like, well, fuck it, Henry will be safe.
Well, it's that kind of thing, and she probably sees the trauma that was already inflicted on their son, by him, not just in this episode, but throughout the series, and his lies, and how easily he weaves those and manipulates people, and and the way he's got their heads spinning, and they're complete wrecks throughout this series because of the lies he's telling and consistently telling them, and only changing once they found out the truth. So I think it's the sort of situation where she realized, like, well, this is the rest of my son's life with his father if his father's not in jail. Also, whether guilty or innocent, this trauma is going to continue.
Yeah, where the hell would they'd have to move to not be known for that? They'd have to
well not
go to
only
Montana or some shit.
well, not only not being known, but if he's still in his father's life, if he's ruled to be innocent and has any level of custody, this is, he still has to deal with his father. So
get to that learned behavior versus nature versus nurture. So he would still be nurturing that same kind of behavior in his child should he still be around his kid.
Yeah, and not only that, even if Henry's better, he winds up to be better than his father, and he sees through it, and doesn't learn to become like his dad. He's still being tormented, by his dad's lies and half truths that he comes up with, and he'll never really know what's true, and that's a hard thing to live with.
Speaking of trauma, so yeah, we're talking about Henry's. Well, let's talk about Miguel's. Here's a kid who was, and they addressed it. We talked about it last week, but they addressed it directly. Haley basically said, he's here as a prop. Well, I'm going to put him on the stand. Now, I like, the character is very interesting, Haley Fitzgerald, but she's ruthless. And she puts Miguel on the stand. It works, obviously, in her client's favor, but you basically force a kid not only to relive the, thoughts of his mother's death, but then to relive any trauma that happened prior to her death between his parents. These two kids, Henry and Miguel, at the end of the series, they're definitely two of the true, obviously besides Elena's death, which was, the victim. But these two were also, I thought, victims of Jonathan and everything that he did.
I agree. Like me and Larry were talking about a second ago, the trauma that's going to have on Henry for the rest of his life, knowing what his dad did. Even before he knew what his dad did, he knew his dad was willing to throw him under the bus to save himself. So regardless, the trauma that Henry saw, and then for Miguel to see his mom that way, and then have an attorney try to be like, well, were your parents fighting? To put that doubt in his head that maybe it was my dad. So those two will suffer way past the end of this trial for a very long time. And that's kind of hard to, to me, that was one of the harder parts to watch in the show, to see the effect that was going to have on the kids for forever.
Oh yeah, and Miguel definitely, because for one, not only was it the trial for Miguel or the death of his mother, the fact that she was murdered by someone who was his doctor, who was seemingly friendly with him and would crack jokes with him and everything, and
The man that saved his life.
the person who saved his life killed his mother. So it's very traumatic, and and then there's that scene afterwards where he comes to the house. Well, not afterwards, but in previous episodes where he comes to Miguel's house and tries to convince him and his father that he didn't. Just he's playing with their emotions in that scene too. So there's just so much that mentally Miguel's going to have to deal with.
The more you dig in, and I think that, that's why I was saying I was leaning towards yes, but I'm leaning even more towards, as far as having enjoyed the ending. The more you dig into everything, the consequences of what Jonathan did, the more you realize, wow, there was more going on. Now, I want to go into the fact that there were a lot of false leads, and one in particular does sort of bother me. Now, before we started recording, Spencer, you had a few answers for that, so I want you to go into that. But specifically, Grace, her mental state. When you get into the first several episodes, there's a lot of hints that there's something else going on as far as false memories, her seeing things. There's a lot going on with the character, and the show seems to be pointing in the direction that there's something about Grace we don't know medically, that turns out to have not in any way, shape, or form played into the ending. You had some thoughts on that, Spencer?
Yeah, I did, and I still think that she's a little bonkers, but it the way they explained it come the end, uh, when she was getting cross-examined, kind of made me feel that maybe she's not crazy. Maybe it's just they're visualizing her analyzing the situation. We were talking about, and there was a point, Larry, when we kept saying the was it unreliable narrator, and she mentioned, she was like, they always say that I'm a reliable narrator. I was like, well, shit. They're trying to point us away from her being the So even at that point, for a moment, I was still in question. But uh, during that scene, they kept talking about how she was really good at reading people. I think that, when they walked out and they showed her walking with Grace, and basically they set up Jonathan when she got cross-examined. I think that she they were visualizing what she was seeing in Jonathan. Uh, because I think that she was beginning to realize that he was, a narcissist. They never showed. I don't recall them ever showing that scene where she told Sylvia that she thought he was a narcissist, which means to me, if in the comments, if you remember that from any of the episodes, please let me know. I don't recall that, but I think that in that scene, I think that they were alluding to Grace has been her confidant for a long time. I think that she had basically went to Grace showing what kind of person he really was for, as long as they've been friends. And I think that everything that she was seeing, all those little memories we were getting, was her trying to piece together what actually happened. And in her head, she was visualizing the kind of person that she saw in Jonathan, that she was figuring out that he's not just a little bit possessive or a little bit narcissistic, that he really is just as big a monster as we were seeing.
Well, that still makes certain memories a little bit weird, like her locker room memory, which that one was clearly, like the scene itself was clearly her and Elena in the locker room, and then we got a seemingly a memory which showed that same scene but very different. It almost feels like, if there wasn't a mistake, or or if the memories, or should we say the visualizations that she has, if they're meant to represent something, it's almost as if the writers weren't sure what they wanted them to represent at first. Because if that's the case, then that whole scene in the locker room is pointless. And why did we flash back to her childhood? And I just want to bring this up, and this is unrelated to the memories, but this is kind of a loose thread also in my mind. What was it even necessary to mention that there was another woman, like, twice, other than Elena?
Yeah, I was going to bring that up. That was another questionable
Well,
loose end.
I don't think it was. The only reason that I'm thinking, um, to me, this just goes back to showing the kind of person Jonathan was. I don't think that it was, I think that it was intentionally trying to make us think that maybe it's somebody else, maybe it was Sylvia, maybe one of the other people that filed a complaint was, and this is a thought I had while I was watching it tonight. I was like, well, shit, if Grace met him at the hospital, I said maybe she was the other woman, and his wife filed a complaint. Like, I was trying to put all these things together, and I think really what they were trying to do by the end of it is show that anybody that showed him attention and love just fed into his ego, which is, I mean, that's what the diagnosis would do. But he, they said, what was it that whether or not he loved everybody or if he loved them loving him, and I think that that's what it was. I think that the reason he was an oncology doctor was because the people had, this desire to need him. He was their savior. He was put on this pedestal to all these people. The grandiose feeling of being that important fed into what he was as a person. And I think that it it was meant to kind of lead us away from maybe it being him, but I think by the end it was just trying to show us who he was.
The only issue I had with the way the murder went down, I only had one, was I thought there would be more to it. Like Jonathan doing it, I get it. He even said that, he felt Elena was threatening his family dynamic, which was true. The painting proved that she did, in fact, have an obsession
That's the white female.
with Grace. Yeah, they were setting that up. And then there was the line where she was excited, she was going to have tea or whatever with Grace, and she wanted to introduce Henry and Miguel. And then he snaps, and then you have, the altercation. I really would have preferred there had been a little bit more. Maybe I thought at that point, I thought that he would see the painting, and that would trigger him because he would then freak out like, oh my God, she is obsessed, and that's why he did it. But it didn't go down that way, so and what you're saying, Larry, it could have been better. That's one area where I think there needed to be a few more little things with the murder that I don't mind it being Jonathan. I just think they could have had a few more pieces to it for all the other pieces, because otherwise, like you said, why show me all these things unless they play in.
Yeah, it's a lot of that. It's a lot. Why show me these, Grace's perspective, inner perspective on these things, or these false memories or visions or whatever you want to call them, because those all seem pointless. Those all really do. And like, if you're trying to explain it as her figuring things out, then and it seems likely now that we've gotten to the end, that's what they were trying to do, then they did a bad job of it. It was really misleading and made it seem like, okay, these are things that may have happened. It definitely seemed like, these are possible things that actually happened, and she's remembering things wrong. It in no way until we got to this point led you to believe otherwise. That well, other than that, these could be memories, or in fact, we like you said, we have like a quick flashback to her childhood, and even the intro in a way, as some in the comments have mentioned, is a little misleading. Makes you think that maybe Grace has a history of mental illness or something that may have led her to do this, or that perhaps this has happened, a similar thing has happened in the past. And the whole other woman thing, there was enough emphasis on that scene, and the cinematography behind it, where they just kind of linger on him thinking about it and just going, there was one, but it wasn't substantial. It didn't really matter. That you thought it would pop up again, and you thought it would matter. It was just a little too misleading. It was almost as misleading as Lost going, they're not in purgatory. No. It's all these other things. Let's sprinkle in all these other things that are technically unrelated to what's going on right now. It wasn't that bad, but
I was going to say it was 6 episodes, even if you were being misled
yeah,
a
right.
little
Yeah,
bit.
it's not. Yeah, exactly. It's not as bad as Lost, but
6 seasons.
It's bordering on that.
Apiece.
It's bordering on that kind of deception in a way. At least with Grace's memories. Glossing over the other woman. Okay, fine. But Grace's memories just kind of straight up look like memories. They didn't look like, oh, she's trying to detective through some things. She's because the locker room scene didn't make any sense. The elevator, like, yeah, her walking into the studio, but even then, why could Grace picture that studio so vividly and picture the murder so vividly? Why was it, exactly the studio as it's laid out? And then we see the studio later and it's the exact same. Like, and the mallet and everything, why was all that pictured?
I have a question about Jonathan specifically. And this could play into if they did a second season. I don't know that they will, but let's say they were going to do a second season. Jonathan, they've been together, she said, since 2002, right? And this is supposed to be roughly present day. So they've been together almost, 2 decades. I find it hard to believe
Well, I think
that.
they said together 17 years, married for 14.
There you go. I find it hard to believe that everything we learn about him through the course of this series has been all the deception and the lies and him using his charm, him getting money out of her, her father, him getting fired, but then nobody finding out, obviously a murder, all the affairs, all the things he's done. I find it hard to believe that he hasn't been doing this stuff for years and years, and that there's potentially other crazy storylines that could be tied to, Jonathan's past. If you were going to do a second series, would you is that what you would do? Would you go into
Yes.
Jonathan's past? And perhaps Donald Sutherland has covered up things that haven't come to light yet. I'm just thinking out, if I was going to do a second series, what would it be? And all the pieces that they've laid out. Um, would you be into that? Not into that? What do you guys think?
I think if they went that route, I would be. If they didn't focus on Grace as much, if they focused, because we just talked,
She would definitely be, a part of it. I'm sure. Yeah.
I'm just saying not the focus, because what we talked about at the beginning was, if they did another season, what would they do? Focus on Grace trying to handle what happened and move forward with Henry? I wouldn't be interested with that. But what you're saying is showing how it led to this point, almost like a prequel series, showing one of the other 3 times he got in trouble. And what you were saying is, what strengthens my point is that he has done this for forever. He's always relied on his charm. He's always relied on literally everyone else seeing him to be this great individual. But I think Donald Sutherland saw through that, because I think he's very much a similar kind of bird. He's always relied on his charm.
There's definitely skeletons in that closet.
Yeah.
At least it appears. Yeah.
So I think that, he saw Jonathan in himself. So I think that exploring the past for Jonathan would be a cool way to do a second season, if they did that.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I may or may not be interested in that. It really depends on how they execute something like that, because it's the sort of thing like, what would you put in that we haven't seen of him already, and what more is there actually to reveal about his nature? We know he's very self-serving, and we know he's a sociopath to the point that he only seemingly cares about his son to the extent that how his son is perceived is an extension of his personal accomplishments, how good he is as a father. So where could you go with that if it's a prequel? And if it's a sequel, like, would you have it where there's more things going on, or it's a more complex web, and he's just kind of pulling a Hannibal Lecter from prison? Like, what would you actually do with that?
That's sort of where my thoughts went. The reason it came to mind was, like I said, it said series finale. As far as I know, it's done. I don't know that there's going to be any more, but I think it had some decent success, and people are talking about it. And I read a couple of reviews before we got on here, and there's some positive vibes towards even the ending. And so I was like, well, if HBO decided to keep going, what could they do with it? And I immediately thought, and I'm not going to spoil anything here, but there's a girl with the dragon tattoo. And yeah. And so if anyone who's familiar with that, like I said, I don't want to spoil it, but the first film is a very simple story. And then it goes insane for the next couple. And it's one of those things where it changes genres. It completely goes in a completely different direction from what it was. And so I started thinking about this, like, what if there was way more going on with Jonathan that we didn't know about? What if there's other things happening? What if, Donald Sutherland is involved and stuff? I just started thinking, okay, if I had to write a sequel, what would it be? And that's where my mind went. Like, I find, and plus the series itself is telling us all these crazy things about Jonathan, and yet it's, it'd been 20 years and he's just now getting caught, if you will. So that was my thought. The other thought was Haley Fitzgerald. I think that's a very interesting character. Ruthless, not a good person. I mean, I do enjoy the performance was amazing, and the scene in which she goes to their house and they have the hammer, and she's legitimately shaken. The performance is great. Everybody's performance was great in that scene, not knowing what to do. Everybody freaking out. If you look, she didn't cry, but her eyes got watery because she was panicking, and she's quickly having to problem solve immediately. Very very well done scene. But I am interested in that character, and if they were going to continue a series with her, helping murderers out, I guess. I would be curious to see where they went with that. What do you guys think about that particular character? Do you think she could carry a series?
I think she could, but with Perry Mason, there's a couple other series that they have that are similar to that already.
Yeah, but he's very much, he's going for the poor guy, and you know what I mean? Like, it's a different kind of style where she would go for the only the rich.
He's big. She's helping people get off on murder raps, not.
Well, yeah. Do you think? So are you saying something?
Thing, but like.
So are you saying
public defender vibe that's going the extra mile to help the innocent person, whereas she's protecting people who've done some shit.
So are you saying that roughly, perhaps a series where she's going through different cases, or she's got one major overarching case per season?
Yes.
And perhaps we get like a throwback to this, like, maybe, Jonathan's calling her from prison and everything, and she's refusing to help him, and he's like, you're a part of this. You've helped me conceal evidence. You were in the room when we found that hammer.
Yeah, you're on the right track. Yeah, that's what, yeah, something along those lines.
I think that a prequel to me would shed more light on this season. All that happened, they didn't show. It was very quick, like as far as timeline. So from the time the show started, to the time where he murdered Elena, was a very short period of time. So when we're talking, how did she not know that he was this kind of person? We don't know that she didn't know that she wasn't just basically willingly glossing it over, because we didn't get any of their backstory until after everything happened. So I think that showing the kind of life that Grace was living. I
don't completely agree, because I'm basing it off of the first episode. To me, the first episode, if you look at the first about 15 minutes, to me, that was the show telling me this is the family dynamic. And look at the exchange with the Frasers and breakfast and the dog story and getting ready for school. And so in that particular scene, it was painting it as, this is a happy family. There's no conflict. Everything's all right. He walks his son to school. They have, personable conversations about the teacher. And to me, that's what the show was trying to tell me, is that there had been no conflicts up to this point, that everything was A-okay. And then over the next couple episodes, as she's learning more and more, that's sort of the big uptick in drama, is she couldn't believe it. Wait, what? He did this. He borrowed this money. He was fired from his job. And so that's how I felt the show was portraying it.
I don't disagree that that's what they were trying to portray. I disagree that the reason they were trying to do it was to throw you off, and which, Larry said that's what he didn't like. It felt like they were intentionally trying to mislead you, and they were.
Well, yeah, I'm just saying my problem was more with the way they went about it than anything. It's just like, yeah, sure, you can mislead me in a way, but mislead me in a way where afterwards I go, oh, okay, that makes sense. It could have been this as well, or that could have meant very little. But this just seemed, outright deceitful in the way that, it's like, okay, so that plot thread went nowhere, and these other things meant absolutely nothing. It's, it's not even related to anything else in the series. It's just unresolved. It's like, okay, so it's just Jonathan then.
I didn't get any feeling of unresolvedness. I don't feel like anything. I didn't feel anything was unresolved. I do feel like you said, Brian, that her testimony scene was to me the most telling of every.
The series hinged on that scene. It's difficult reviewing or discussing a final episode of a season or a series because you're not just talking about that episode. You're talking about the entirety of the series. Everything hinges on that episode. And in this episode's case, it all hinges on one scene and one scene only, Grace on the stand. I thought the performance was great. I thought all the callbacks throughout the season was great. And that was the scene that really, made me sort of lean towards I enjoyed the ending because I thought it was sort of thought out. Now, like I pointed out the things, I had issues with, but for the most part, that scene was very well performed, acted. I loved Haley Fitzgerald's reactions. I loved all the dynamics of that scene. I loved Donald Sutherland. If you paid attention to his mannerisms during that scene was the entire series all wrapped up in 5 minutes, and I thought it was done well.
It was like Jonathan getting his comeuppance.
Well, yeah, and I will say, outside of my gripes and about this, I did like that scene, and it did work, and the whole series was very well acted for the most part, and I'm not going to complain about Henry because he's a child actor, but.
I thought he did.
He did okay.
He did good. I thought his best scene was in this episode. What the scene you talked about earlier, where he's sitting in the window. Mm-hmm. I thought that was a really well done scene. I thought both of them did great in that scene.
I will say, as the series went on, it seems like his acting has gotten better. Because towards the beginning of the series, it was a little shaky, but
he's with Donald Sutherland and
true.
Hugh Grant, and
that could be nerves, if anything. Yeah. That could definitely be nerves. But yeah, the way they went through that and the acting and Jonathan's reaction once he realized he had been betrayed and it was pretty great. And also, I think that goes back to what you were saying earlier about Grace and perhaps even, kind of the takeaway from the story and where the end really led that, to Grace at this point with the number of lies, with the amount of hurt that was caused and the amount of hurt that would continue to be caused, if he wasn't in jail, it didn't really matter. He needed to be in jail. He needed to be somewhere where he couldn't hurt people anymore. Given the amount of things he had that we know that he has done.
Had there been a scene at the end after the rescue of Henry, of Grace discussing the case, maybe with Sylvia or whoever, or her father, that would have been better, her father, and her saying, I wasn't sure if he did it, but it didn't matter. Would you have liked the series better? I know you're saying you didn't hate the series, but you definitely have.
Well, yeah, and I'm saying that's not that gripe because the courtroom scene that's not the gripe I have because the courtroom scene is kind of that for me. When we're going through
all the red herrings.
I don't like the red herrings that led nowhere and and weren't really resolved. Primarily, the false memories. That's my primary gripe. The false memories and the other woman thing, like I said, could take it or leave it, but I definitely feel like they should have done more with that. But and anything at that, he's even if you wanted it to be Henry, and if it was the other woman wasn't Sylvia, it's the sort of thing. It's like, well, he's a narcissist and a sociopath. There could have been 6 other women for all we know. You could have used that to reinforce that he's a liar.
And one of them was a secret agent that ties into a global conspiracy. And that is the second series now.
I would say, we're having a little laugh here, but you got to admit you would have liked that better too if they had reinforced that in some way, if they had addressed those themes.
I wrote down those exact notes. I wrote down in my notes the other woman, Grace's memories. Those are literally in here. So no, I'm with you in terms of they set up things that they didn't really pay off, but it didn't bother me as much because I felt, like I said, that courtroom scene. I told you my biggest gripe was the fact that I needed a little bit more from Jonathan in terms of why he committed the murder. I didn't like the murder scene itself. I think the murder scene itself needed a little bit more. Why have the painting? To me, the painting is what if I had to complain or if I was going to gripe about anything, why didn't the painting come into the picture. Why didn't he see the painting? And yeah, I know.
That would have
And
been a nice touch,
but
but
why did he see the painting? That's what triggered her. You know, it was things like that that in terms of him committing the murder. I don't mind that he was the murderer, but it was the fact that the way that scene played out, I would have done a little more because at this point he's like I said, I keep saying it, but he's been playing these games for decades, and yet he's never gotten caught for murder. He's never been that sloppy. Why now? Why with
Well,
this situation?
well, yeah, and I think I wouldn't have mind the memories or something, or it being Jonathan would have made a little bit more sense if everything that led you elsewhere. If a lot of those other hints were basically Jonathan playing everyone, like even if her fake memories of certain, like if her misleading memories or thoughts about certain events were because Jonathan led her to believe that, or she's seen that painting before because you know Jonathan's had it, or like I'm trying not to name this series where a similar thing happened. Well, I'm just going to say it. There's a similar scene in a season, not a similar scene, but a similar kind of setup in a series, Hannibal, when Will's not sure of some of his memories and he's having like certain mental
You're
difficulties
spoiling
and what.
Hannibal, man.
Yeah.
It's a great show. I love that show.
It's a great show, but I'm spoiling very little of it. I don't
Yeah.
want to spoil any of it, but and it's clear at a certain point you as the audience aren't sure what's going on with him, but then it's clear that it's Hannibal. He's like Will's sick because of Hannibal, and he's having these mental difficulties, which are a
But
symptom
see,
of this disease, and
I
yeah.
I
mean,
don't feel that that's what this was at all.
yeah, and I'm going comparing Hannibal. Look, this is an opinion, but to me, Hannibal is like 10 out of 10 masterpiece entertainment. I love Hannibal. I can watch every episode multiple times and pick out new things. This series I thought was serviceable. I thought it was good. I thought the acting was good. The writing was decent. It had some issues. I would recommend this to people who are into crime, dramas and into courtroom procedurals. I think The Undoing, if they were going to do a second season, depending on what it's going to be about, but some of the ideas we were just talking about, I'd be into a potential second season. I didn't leave this with a sour taste in my mouth. We did Lovecraft Country, and we got to the finale, and I loved the series, but I did leave it with a bit of a bad taste in my mouth. I didn't love the ending. I had a lot of issues with it. I didn't feel that way with this necessarily. And on that note, your guys, what is your summarized feelings on The Undoing as a whole, as a six issue? We read comics as a 6 episode miniseries.
I enjoyed it. I felt that they tried to kind of throw you off the scent. They set up the character to let you know that he is also a suspect, but they try to make you believe that he isn't that big of a monster. But then by the end, you realize the kind of person he is. And I think that the acting with the people who are billed in it, I was expecting it to be well done. I thought it was very well done. There's a couple things that I thought they were trying to. I think they focused on a few things that made you believe that they were going to be bigger, but that was also, we analyzed each one of these episodes for hours afterwards, and some of the straws that we were grasping at made me feel like there was open-ended questions, but after watching this episode, I didn't feel that there was anything open-ended or left unanswered, and I really did enjoy it.
I enjoyed it too. I think I liked it about as much as you like, and you did, Brian. And I know as much as I complain, a lot of people may not believe that, but that's probably true. And but I will say, when it's not just a clue, but when it's that in your face, as the information they presented us with, it's not grasping at straws, at least not in my opinion. Like
We
we
Sylvia
didn't.
to be the killer.
Well,
Come on now, we're
well,
grasping at straws. That's okay.
that wasn't
A
necessarily
lot of
correct.
people were.
A lot of
I
people.
was, I
We
would
got
say that.
Well, I'm
Not
not
even
talking
just.
about that. Well,
Oh,
what I mean by that is the fact that the memories seem to mean more. And part of what linked me to that is if it was Sylvia, it would make the memories make more sense because we have like what seems to be scenes of a young Grace, in one episode, and in the intro, and she has these memories of the murder. And now, if it was her friend Sylvia, and if her, having mental issues that go way back, or if her needing therapy from way back or something, which the show seemed to have hinted that, like you said, Spencer, something's off about Grace. Then, it being her best friend, a longtime friend Sylvia, instead of her, that would make sense. It wasn't necessarily grasping, and plus Sylvia was there for so much and seemed to be real reliable. When a lot of friends with all this crap going on with your life, they'd be real supportive and they'd be willing to help you out with whatever. But they wouldn't want those details like Sylvia would want those details. Most people will want a vacation, to be honest.
Yes, but when we're piecing stuff together because we're analyzing stuff so much, that's what they wanted from this show. They wanted you to do that. So them leaving little breadcrumbs that are leading us completely into left field, that's what they wanted. They didn't want it to be evident that it was Jonathan. So
I wouldn't say they left a breadcrumb. I'd say they left half a loaf.
Interrupting me?
What's that now?
I said, why do you keep interrupting me?
Because it's your cadence, that throws me off. That's all.
No.
It's not on purpose or anything. It's just your cadence.
Yeah.
If you say cicadas. But yeah, we don't give scores on here. That's not really our thing, so I don't really want to do that. That's just not our style. Like you said, we break things down, we discuss it. If we like it, we like it. If we don't, we don't, and we'll explain our side. So we definitely want to hear what the audience has to think. Did you love it? Is this 10 out of 10 entertainment to you? If so, let us know why. Did you hate it? Did you have problems with it? If so, let us know. Or are you, middle of the road? As I said, we have content coming. Next Sunday, we're going to be doing Your Honor. We have, what else we got going on? We got the Fargo season finale coming up in a day. Very curious to see how that's going to end. That show's been insane, especially the last episode. We're doing Big Sky on Wednesdays, and we are still doing The Mandalorian. We would love it if you went over there and checked it out. If you're not into it, you're not into it. The Stand's coming up mid-December, and yeah, lots of content coming to the channel. We appreciate your views and your thumbs up and your comments, and we hope to see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.